Have you ever noticed the peculiar paradox that seems to govern our relationship with life? The more desperately we try to control our circumstances, our emotions, our relationships, our future, the more these very things seem to slip through our fingers like sand. We plan meticulously for an important event, only to have unexpected complications arise. We carefully script a crucial conversation, only to find it veering wildly off course. We construct elaborate 5-year plans, only to have life introduce variables we never could have anticipated. And in response to these deviations from our carefully laid plans, we typically double down on our efforts to control. We create more detailed plans. We implement more rigorous systems. We tighten our grip. We try harder. We become more vigilant, more determined, more relentless in our pursuit of certainty, security, and predictability. But what if this entire approach is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how life actually works? What if our desperate attempts to control life are not only ineffective, but actually counterproductive? What if the more we try to control life, the more it ends up controlling us? What if our relentless pursuit of control is the very thing keeping us from the freedom, peace, and authentic engagement with life that we truly desire? If you enjoy this type of deep reflection, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. And most importantly, leave a comment below telling us if this has ever happened to you, or if you know someone who passed through this. You see, control is the great addiction of our modern world, the unexamined compulsion that drives so much of our behavior. And like any addiction, it promises what it cannot deliver: a sense of safety, certainty, and mastery over our experience. The control addict lives under the persistent illusion that if they just try hard enough, plan carefully enough, remain vigilant enough, they can somehow manage life into submission, bend reality to their will, eliminate uncertainty and vulnerability from their experience. And when their efforts at control inevitably fail, they don't question the underlying assumption. They simply redouble their efforts, convinced that the solution is more control, not less. The first way in which our attempts to control life end up controlling us is through the creation of chronic anxiety. When you believe that your well-being depends on being able to control circumstances, you set yourself up for a constant state of low-grade fear. Because the truth is, most of what happens in life is beyond your direct control. The economy fluctuates, people make unexpected choices, bodies get sick, accidents happen, weather changes. Opportunities appear and disappear through no action of your own. And when your sense of safety depends on controlling these uncontrollable variables, you can never truly relax. You must remain vigilant, scanning the horizon for potential threats, preparing for all possible contingencies, attempting to anticipate every variable. I remember speaking with a woman, let's call her Sarah, who had structured her entire life around the pursuit of control. She had an impressive career that provided financial security. She maintained a strict diet and exercise regimen to control her health and appearance. She carefully managed her relationships, keeping people at a safe distance where they couldn't disrupt her carefully ordered life. She had backup plans for her backup plans. From the outside, her life looked like a model of success and stability. But inwardly, she was exhausted, constantly anxious, unable to ever fully relax and enjoy the very security she had worked so hard to create. The breakthrough for Sarah came when she realized that her pursuit of control was actually controlling her. Her entire life had become structured around avoiding vulnerability, eliminating uncertainty, preventing the unpredictable. And in trying to make life safe, she had made it small. She had traded aliveness for security, authenticity for predictability, deep connection for manageable interactions. Her anxiety wasn't a sign that she needed more control. It was a symptom of the control paradigm itself, the inevitable result of trying to manage the unmanageable. The second way our attempts to control life end up controlling us is through the perpetuation of suffering. When we believe that life should conform to our expectations, we set ourselves up for constant disappointment and frustration, because life, in its infinite complexity and creativity, will never fit perfectly into the narrow confines of our preferences and plans. It will always exceed our categories, surprise our expectations, challenge our assumptions. And when we respond to these inevitable deviations by tightening our grip, by trying to force reality back into alignment with our demands, we create unnecessary suffering for ourselves and others. This pattern is particularly evident in our relationships. We try to control how others perceive us, how they feel about us, how they treat us. We attempt to manage their behavior, their choices, their emotions. And when they inevitably fail to conform to our expectations, when they make choices we don't understand, express emotions that make us uncomfortable, perceive us in ways that don't match our self-image, we often respond by trying to control them more. We criticize, manipulate, withdraw, punish, all in an effort to bring them back into alignment with our needs and expectations. And in doing so, we damage the very connections we're trying to preserve. I once worked with a couple, let's call them Michael and Emily, who were caught in this dynamic. Michael was constantly trying to control Emily's emotions, especially her anxiety. When she expressed worry or fear, he would immediately try to fix it, offering solutions, minimizing her concerns, sometimes even getting angry when she couldn't simply be rational and set her fears aside. He believed he was helping, trying to rescue her from unnecessary suffering. But his attempts to control her emotional experience only made things worse. She felt invalidated, misunderstood, unable to be authentic in his presence. And he felt frustrated, helpless, increasingly resentful of her refusal to be happy. The shift came when Michael recognized that his attempts to control Emily's emotions were actually about managing his own discomfort with uncertainty and vulnerability. When she was anxious, it triggered his own unacknowledged fears, his sense of helplessness, his discomfort with emotions he had been taught to suppress. Once he understood this, he was able to let go of trying to control her experience and instead simply be present with her, creating a space where both of them could be authentic rather than managed. And paradoxically, this surrender of control led to a deeper connection than all his efforts at control had ever achieved. The third way our attempts to control life end up controlling us is through the constriction of possibility. When we approach life with a control mindset, we naturally gravitate towards the familiar, the predictable, the manageable. We avoid situations where outcomes are uncertain, where we might fail, where we might be vulnerable. We stick to well-worn paths, established routines, familiar territories where we feel competent and in command. And in doing so, we drastically limit the possibilities available to us. We close ourselves off from the unexpected opportunities, the serendipitous connections, the transformative experiences that often arise in the spaces between our plans. This constriction happens not only in our external choices, but in our internal landscape as well. We try to control our thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations, labeling some as acceptable and others as problematic. We develop elaborate strategies to avoid feeling vulnerable, uncertain, inadequate, afraid. We build internal walls, create no-go zones in our own consciousness, spend enormous energy trying to control our inner experience. And this internal control regime cuts us off from the full spectrum of our humanity, the rich complexity of our emotional life, the depth and wisdom that can only emerge when we're willing to be fully present with all that arises within us. I remember working with a writer, let's call him David, who was paralyzed by creative blocks. He approached his writing with a rigid control mentality, meticulously outlining every chapter, planning every scene, trying to anticipate and solve all potential problems before he even began writing. He had books about proper story structure, character development, dialogue techniques. He analyzed successful novels, trying to reverse engineer their formulas. But when he actually sat down to write, nothing came. The well was dry. The muse was silent. The more he tried to control the creative process, the more it eluded him. The breakthrough came when David finally surrendered control and embraced a more exploratory approach. Rather than trying to plan everything in advance, he allowed himself to write without knowing exactly where the story was going. He followed threads of curiosity and intuition rather than rigid outlines. He gave his characters room to surprise him, allowed the story to evolve in ways he hadn't anticipated. And in this surrender of control, something remarkable happened. The writing began to flow. The story came alive. Characters emerged with a depth and authenticity that his careful planning had never achieved. By loosening his grip, he opened himself to creative possibilities that his control paradigm had made inaccessible. The fourth way our attempts to control life end up controlling us is through the creation of conditional happiness. When we believe that our well-being depends on circumstances aligning with our preferences, we place our happiness at the mercy of factors largely beyond our control. We say to life, "I'll be happy when I get the promotion, find the perfect partner, achieve financial security, receive recognition, solve this problem." And in doing so, we postpone our joy, make our peace contingent on external conditions, surrender our well-being to the ever-changing winds of circumstance. This conditional approach to happiness creates a perpetual state of subtle dissatisfaction with the present. There's always something that needs to be fixed, improved, achieved, or acquired before we can fully relax and enjoy life. There's always some problem to solve, some imperfection to address, some goal to reach. And even when we achieve the conditions we thought would make us happy, the satisfaction is fleeting. The goalposts move, new requirements for happiness emerge. The control paradigm keeps us chasing a sense of completion and contentment that remains perpetually just beyond our grasp. I once knew a man, let's call him Robert, who had organized his entire life around the pursuit of financial security. He believed that once he achieved a certain net worth, a certain level of passive income, a certain degree of financial insulation from risk, then he could finally relax and enjoy life. Every decision he made was filtered through this lens. Relationships, health, experiences, creative pursuits, all were secondary to the primary goal of achieving financial control. And he was successful, at least by conventional standards. By his mid-40s, he had amassed significant wealth, multiple income streams, a carefully diversified portfolio. But something curious happened when he reached the financial goals he had set. Rather than feeling the security and peace he had anticipated, he found himself more anxious than ever. Now he had something to lose. Market fluctuations that wouldn't have registered before now kept him up at night. He found himself constantly checking his investments, worrying about potential economic downturns, fretting about regulatory changes that might impact his wealth. The very success he had achieved became a source of new anxiety, new things to control, new vulnerabilities to manage. The financial freedom that was supposed to bring happiness had become another cage. The shift for Robert came through a health crisis that forced him to confront the fundamental uncertainty of life. No amount of wealth could completely protect him from the vulnerability of having a human body. No financial plan could eliminate all risk from his existence. This recognition, though initially terrifying, eventually led to a profound liberation. If complete control was impossible anyway, perhaps he could loosen his grip, approach life with more openness, allow his happiness to rest on a more stable foundation than the ever-shifting circumstances of wealth, health, and achievement. Perhaps he could find security not in controlling conditions, but in developing the resilience to meet whatever conditions arose with presence, wisdom, and grace. The fifth way our attempts to control life end up controlling us is through the perpetuation of the very problems we're trying to solve. This is perhaps the most insidious aspect of the control paradigm, the way our solutions often reinforce and amplify the very difficulties they're meant to address. We try to control our anxiety through avoidance, only to find our world shrinking as more and more situations become triggers to be avoided. We try to control our insecurity through achievement, only to discover that each success raises the bar for the next achievement required to keep insecurity at bay. We try to control our fear of abandonment through possessiveness, only to create the very dynamics that damage our relationships and lead to the rejection we fear. This pattern operates not only at the individual level, but at the systemic level as well. Our attempts to control nature lead to ecological imbalances that threaten our survival. Our efforts to control crime through punishment create cycles of violence and marginalization that increase crime rates. Our strategies to control political dissent through oppression fuel the very grievances that lead to revolution. Again and again, we see that force-based solutions to complex problems often exacerbate the very difficulties they're designed to solve. I recall working with a community organization that was experiencing internal conflict. The leadership responded with increasingly rigid policies, more detailed procedures, stricter enforcement of rules, all in an effort to control the discord and restore harmony. But their control-based approach only heightened tensions. People felt micromanaged, distrusted, constrained. Communication became more formal and less authentic. The underlying issues that had sparked the initial conflict went unaddressed, while resentment about the controlling leadership style grew. The very measures implemented to resolve conflict were generating new and deeper conflicts. The breakthrough came when the leadership took a radically different approach. Rather than trying to control the situation, they created spaces for open dialogue. Instead of imposing solutions, they invited collaborative problem-solving. Rather than tightening their grip, they loosened it, trusting the collective wisdom of the community to find its way through the difficulty. This surrender of control was initially frightening. It felt like abandoning the helm during a storm, but it allowed new possibilities to emerge, creative solutions that addressed the root causes of the conflict, rather than simply managing its symptoms. The shift from control to trust, from imposition to collaboration, transformed the organizational culture in ways that no amount of top-down management could have achieved. The sixth way our attempts to control life end up controlling us is through the creation of inauthenticity. When we're constantly trying to manage how others perceive us, we can lose touch with our authentic self. We present carefully curated versions of ourselves designed to elicit specific responses: approval, admiration, acceptance, desire. We hide aspects of our experience that seem unacceptable, shameful, or vulnerable. We construct and maintain facades that we believe will keep us safe, secure our belonging, protect us from rejection or judgment. And in this process, we can become strangers to ourselves, unsure of what we truly feel, what we genuinely want, who we actually are beneath the carefully managed exterior. This inauthenticity doesn't just disconnect us from ourselves, it creates barriers to genuine connection with others. When we're presenting a managed version of ourselves, others are connecting with our performance rather than our authentic being. The acceptance or love we receive is for the persona we're projecting rather than the complex, flawed, beautiful human we actually are. And this leaves us with a painful sense of being unseen, unknown, even in the midst of apparent connection. No matter how much validation our performance receives, it can't satisfy the deeper need to be accepted for who we truly are. I remember a conversation with a successful entrepreneur, let's call her Jennifer, who had built her entire identity around being strong, confident, and in control. She never showed vulnerability, never admitted uncertainty, never revealed the doubts and fears that occasionally plagued her. Her carefully managed image had brought her professional success and a certain kind of respect. But it had also left her profoundly lonely, unable to form deep connections, constantly afraid of being exposed as less perfect than she pretended to be. Her control of her image had become a prison, isolating her from the very connection and acceptance she ultimately craved. The turning point for Jennifer came through a relationship with someone who gently but persistently refused to engage with her facade. This person somehow saw through the performance to the authentic being beneath and related to that deeper self, rather than the carefully constructed image. At first, this was terrifying. Jennifer felt exposed, vulnerable, unsure how to be without her familiar masks and management strategies. But as she gradually allowed herself to be seen in her full complexity, as she risked showing her uncertainty alongside her confidence, her fear alongside her courage, she discovered a kind of freedom and connection that her control paradigm had made impossible. The seventh and perhaps most profound way our attempts to control life end up controlling us is through the obscuration of our deeper nature. When we're identified with the controlling self, we lose touch with the more expansive awareness that is our true identity. We mistake the anxious manager, the vigilant controller, the insecure achiever for who we fundamentally are. We become so absorbed in the drama of control, the plans, the worries, the strategies, the evaluations, that we lose contact with the spacious awareness in which this drama is unfolding. It's like becoming so engrossed in a character in a movie that we forget we're actually the screen on which the movie is playing. This misidentification has profound consequences. When we believe we are the controlling self, rather than the awareness in which this self appears, we experience life as a constant struggle against circumstances, a never-ending effort to manage reality into submission. We feel separate, isolated, vulnerable, at the mercy of a world that never quite cooperates with our demands. We exhaust ourselves trying to protect a self that doesn't ultimately exist in the way we imagine, defend boundaries that are more conceptual than actual, secure a future for an entity that is more process than thing. I recall a conversation with a spiritual teacher who described his own journey from the prison of control to the freedom of surrender. For decades, he had been identified with the controlling self, constantly vigilant, perpetually managing, forever trying to achieve security through effort and vigilance. His spiritual practices themselves had become extensions of this control paradigm, techniques to achieve states, methods to reach enlightenment, strategies to become a better person. And the more he tried, the more elusive peace became. The breakthrough came not through more effort, but through a radical letting go. In the moment of complete exhaustion, he surrendered the entire project of control, the whole enterprise of trying to achieve, become, arrive. And in that surrender, something unexpected revealed itself. A vast, spacious awareness that had been present all along, obscured by his identification with the controlling self. This awareness wasn't something he needed to create or achieve. It was what he already was and had always been, prior to all the strategies of control and achievement. And from this recognition, a different way of being emerged. Not the anxious vigilance of the controller, but the open presence of awareness itself, engaged with life, but not identified with the drama of control. So, what's the alternative to this control paradigm that creates so much unnecessary suffering? It's not reckless abandonment of responsibility, not passive resignation to whatever happens, not a descent into chaos or impulsivity. It's a fundamental shift in our relationship with life, from opposition to participation, from resistance to receptivity, from forcing to allowing. It's learning to work with the grain of reality rather than against it, to align our actions with the natural flow of life rather than constantly striving to bend life to our will. This shift doesn't happen through more effort, more strategies, more techniques. It happens through recognition, The recognition that control is ultimately an illusion, that our well-being doesn't depend on managing circumstances, but on how we meet whatever circumstances arise, that life itself has an intelligence and rhythm that's wiser than our anxious planning. It happens through surrender, not a passive giving up, but an active yielding to reality as it is. A willingness to be with what is, rather than constantly striving for what we think should be. This surrender doesn't mean we never plan, never act, never pursue goals or create boundaries, but we do so from a different consciousness. Not from the anxious, vigilant controller, but from the spacious awareness that is our deeper nature. We learn to hold our plans lightly, to remain flexible in the face of changing circumstances, to trust the intelligence of life even when it doesn't conform to our expectations. We discover that effectiveness doesn't require force, that influence doesn't demand control, that wisdom emerges naturally when we stop trying to manage reality and instead attune ourselves to its deeper currents. And paradoxically, this surrender of control often leads to a kind of mastery that control itself can never achieve. Like the skilled sailor who doesn't fight the wind but works with it, who doesn't resist the currents but uses them to advantage, we learn to accomplish with ease what our controlling efforts could never achieve through force. We discover that many of the problems we've been struggling to solve actually dissolve when approached with presence rather than control, with acceptance rather than resistance, with curiosity rather than certainty. So if you find yourself exhausted by the never-ending project of control, if you're weary of the constant vigilance, the perpetual management, the endless effort to make life conform to your expectations, I invite you to experiment with a different approach. Not to abandon all plans or responsibilities, not to descend into chaos or impulsivity, but to hold your grip a little more lightly, to trust a little more deeply, to make space for the intelligence of life to express itself through your circumstances rather than constantly imposing your will upon them. Because the truth is, the more you try to control life, the more it controls you. And the more you surrender to life, not in passive resignation, but in active, engaged participation, the more you discover the freedom, peace, and authentic power that were your birthright all along.